Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today's another installment in my 2022 scouting videos, and today's video will be about Paolo Banchero, who is a projected top 3 pick in next year's draft. So without any further delay, let's get straight into the video. To start off, we do have some stats to go over regarding Paolo. He stands at about 6 feet 10 inches and he weighs about 250 pounds now. And he has about a 7-foot wingspan. And for his high school stats, he averaged about 30 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, about half a block, and 1 steal per game. And he only played in the EYBL his sophomore year due to COVID happening his junior year and the summer leading into his senior year. So the only stats that I could really find regarding anything outside of high school were his EYBL stats from his sophomore year, where he did play with the Seattle Rotary, where he did average 13.6 points, 8 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and 1 block per game. But you have to keep in mind that, again, this was his sophomore year of high school, and he was about 2 inches shorter and about 20 pounds less heavy than what he is currently listed as, or what the current expected measurements are for him as of right now. So again, his high school stats are what they are. They're very dominant, and then again, you have to take his EYBL stats with a grain of salt due to those being his sophomore year stats. Moving on to the strengths of Paolo Banchero as a prospect, first up, we have his overwhelming strength and impressive athleticism. Based on his measurements alone, you can tell how much of a force he was at the high school level, and I expect that to fully translate to the college level. And while he isn't necessarily the most explosive athlete in the world, he is very quick on his feet for his height and weight, and allows him to move up and down the court on both sides of the floor in all kinds of facets very well, again, considering his height and weight. So again, while he isn't necessarily the best leaper in the world, especially at that 6'10" height. He just, given how quick he is, not necessarily how explosive he is, I do expect his strengths as an athlete to translate to the NBA very well, and that to be a big plus on his resume when he does enter the draft next year. And then moving on, his versatility defensively is very special, again, given that height, that weight, and how quick he moves on his feet. He does a good job of not only protecting the paint, again, just how dominant he is as a physical specimen, just being able to swallow up shots, and it feels like his presence is always felt at the high school level. And while he isn't necessarily, the rim protector that a Chet Holmgren or a Yannick Nioza or, even a Jalen Duren is, I think he's a very impressive, rim protector, and I think his versatility is more so his strength rather than his rim protection, right? His ability he can protect the rim, but that's not the best part of his defensive skill set. The best part of his defensive skill set is his ability to cover multiple positions, and he did a very good job of covering perimeter guards as well. And while we haven't seen a big enough sample size, I do think that from what we've seen, he has shown encouraging signs of being able to guard 2 through 4, maybe some 5s at the NBA level, which is a very, very positive sign for Paolo moving forward. And I expect him to be the defensive anchor for Duke. I expect them to empower him in that role in terms of not only guarding some guards on the perimeter when he does get switched out on there, but as well as being a rim protector for them and just altering shots with just overwhelming physical traits, again, with the height and the weight. And again, he does move his feet on the perimeter very well. I think, the one game that really stood out to me was his last game against, Ty Washington and that team, which had a lot of very solid guards. And while he wasn't necessarily matched up with Ty all the time, when he was matched up, I think he did a very solid job. And, he did a good job on the rest of the guards on that team, which is very impressive. Moving forward, he is a very dominant transition player, right? He does a great job of grabbing the rebound, pushing the pace, and which we can talk about that now as well. He does have a very, very solid handle, and while his handle isn't necessarily, he's not going to be breaking people down like Kyrie Irving or anything. It's very solid for his height. He keeps things very simple. When he's not messing around, when he is messing around, there's a lot of footage of him just doing, a bunch of dribble moves, taking step back shots. Right, he's not going to take that against high level competition. But his handle is good enough. Given his overwhelming physical traits. Right, he knows his strengths. He knows how big he is. He plays similar to like a bully ball style on offense. So his handle is simple yet effective, which is very good, and it does the job in transition as well. I do expect him to maybe struggle with it a little bit at the college level, especially in the fast break, where he's not just going to be able to just blow past people just because he's bigger and stronger than him, which he will. But there will be times where he will be matched up with a similar athlete to him, and I could definitely see him struggling with that. But his handle is still very good for his size, very good for his size, and it's a very effective in transition, where he does a great job of, again, grabbing the rebounds, pushing the pace, hitting the open man. And while he is a good outlet passer, I'm sorry, Chet Holmgren is just such an amazing outlet passer that it kind of makes Paolo look worse than he is. But Paolo is a very, very good outlet passer, and he, again, just given how physically dominant he is, and again how quick he is, he's a very good he does a very good job of running the floor, in transition as well. And that also leads into, his dominance on the offensive end in terms of being a roll man, right? At the high school level, nobody was going to stop him as a roll man, and I expect that trend to continue at the college level as well, and even at the NBA level as well. Where in the NBA level, he would definitely need to be much more crafty, simply because he's not just going to be bigger and stronger than everybody. At the highest level, he will need to rely on his IQ and his passing ability and his craftiness, which we will talk about in a little bit. But he definitely did a great job of at the high school level just being bigger and stronger than everybody, and he kind of just cleared the way when he did roll to the basket, again, just because of how much bigger and stronger he was. And he was a very good cutter as well, which is very impressive considering the fact that guys who are just physical freaks the way he is at the high school level, they aren't necessarily the highest IQ players. And I think the film that I did that is available of Paolo, you will see him occasionally make some really good cuts, make great reads in terms of when to cut, when the defense is drawn to the guard, when they generate attention from the defense. He had a couple sequences where he did a great job cutting, which to see that from him again shows that he does have a high IQ, despite really being a bully ball player at the high school level, which is very impressive moving forward. And I hope to see more of that, at Duke and eventually at the NBA level, when he does have, NBA quality guards, playing alongside him. And then moving forward, he is a great facilitator in the half court, right? At the high post, at the low post, even out of rim rolling situations, just because he's so much bigger than everybody. He does a great job of seeing the floor, right? He can hit cutters. He can hit, out of the row. He does a great job of finding shooters. He can find shooters across court. His is very smooth, and it never looks like he's really trying too hard, and which is crazy, right? Because I still feel like even when Paolo was trying hard at the high school level, he still could have been trying harder, right? And which is very impressive to see, which you can tell just how talented he really is. And I expect Duke to run the offense through Paolo and have him be like their offensive hub out the high post, out the low post, and even in some rim rolling situations. I expect them to use Paolo in all sorts of ways, which will bolster his draft stock in terms of his overall versatility. Again, for the NBA level. And then his handle for his size, which we talked about, and then he has a very smooth stroke on his shot, in my opinion. A lot of people have that as a concern, but again, we haven't seen too much footage of his shot. Again, a lot of his shots just happen to be like when he's messing around, right? He'll just do a couple of dribble moves, step back, and throw something up. But when he's off, in the situations that he did play in, against adequate competition, the shot looks smooth, especially, off catch and shoot situations where, there's not any hitches in his shot. I think his guide hand looks fine. His shooting hand looks fine. There's nothing, again, wrong with his form. I think he gets good elevation on it. He holds a shot. The ball has a nice arc. I see the shot translating, honestly. And, with how good of a handle he has, I definitely see him, being able to take 1-2 dribbles into a defender and kind of sort of do a little fadeaway. I could definitely see him adding that to his repertoire right around, the mid-post area. That could definitely be a go-to move for Paolo moving forward, especially considering, again, just how smooth of a shot he has and just how good of a touch he has all around the basket, right? Not even just necessarily on his shot. He has a soft touch on floaters, which has continued to develop since the film from sophomore year to the film from a couple months ago as a senior. But overall, a lot of people have questions about the shot just because we haven't seen it all that much. But from what we have seen, I'm very encouraged, again, as there are no obvious hitches, and his shot is just smooth, overall. Moving on to the concerns I do have with Paolo as a prospect. First up, we have a questionable motor. And while I wouldn't necessarily call his motor an outright concern, I'd say it's more like something to monitor. I can understand why people do have it as a concern, as, most of the time he wasn't really trying in high school with the film that we do have of him. Most of the time he was just messing around really on both sides of the floor, wasn't showing 100% effort. But, again, when you just are that much bigger and stronger than everybody else, and frankly better skill-wise than everybody else, it is understandable to see why you wouldn't, necessarily be trying all that much all the time. And while I do see an avenue for people being concerned, especially since we just saw a player, who was similarly as physically dominant, not necessarily, Paolo isn't as, explosive as Zion, but he is similar in terms of just how much more physically dominant he was than his competition. Right? We all expected Zion to be a defensive superstar, and he's far from that so far in his NBA career. And most of that just has to do with effort. So I do understand why people would have that same mindset about Paolo, but I think Duke is going to empower him as a defender and really force him to be that anchor for them. As I previously stated, in my positives about Paolo section, just a few moments ago. So while I do understand the concerns about a motor, and I feel like I had to put it on here, I wouldn't necessarily outright call it a concern for me personally. It's just something that I am going to be monitoring as we see his collegiate career play out. Excuse me. Then moving on, there's just not that much film on him outside of his couple games with the Seattle Rotary. With his I believe it's the FBL. Outside of that, there's not really that much to see, compared to a player such as, Chet Holmgren, who we have, AAU, we have camps, we have his high school, we have FIBA, even a player like Jaden Hardy, or even overseas player. I think that I found that I had a much easier time finding footage on, a Nikola Jovic or a Caleb Houston well, Caleb Houston isn't necessarily overseas. I had a much easier time finding footage on him. I had a much easier time finding footage on, a Yannick Nyoza, or even a, Osman Dieng, as opposed to Paolo Banchero, which is a bit concerning, as, while he is a very, very, entertaining and very, very, very enticing prospect, you would still like to see a lot more film on him than there is out there. And again, this isn't necessarily a concern. It's just, something to keep in mind, really. And then moving on, really, we could talk about both of these at once. It's will the weight, right, the 250 pounds hold up, and then will the shot translate? And again, both of that just has to do with film, as we haven't necessarily seen him play like a lot, really. But I feel like with the weight, that's really something to keep in mind, like later on in his NBA career, right, with his knees or like his lower leg. But again, I still expect him to be fine, as again, he is very quick on his feet, and he does know how to move around the floor. He isn't all that explosive, so I don't see him going for a dunk and landing wrong, right? And then with the shot, it's just again, lack of footage. So I mean, while on off-ball situations he looks great, on ball situations he was really just messing around. So while the form looks good and the touch is there, it's just we got to see more reps of the shot in live game situations against adequate competition to really take it seriously. So again, these are all just minor concerns, really just stuff to keep in mind, as Paolo is just as complete of a prospect as they come, really, in my opinion. Maybe that's just me being super high on Paolo, but I'm just very confident in him as a prospect, to the point where I don't really have too many. These aren't necessarily concerns for me, and they may be for other people, but these are just things for me to keep in mind. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. My next video is going to be about Jaden Hardy, who is another projected top 3 pick in the upcoming draft, and he will be playing with the G League Ignite for this upcoming season, so stay on the lookout for that. And besides that, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.